In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 main properties of multiplication, and these properties are very similar to the properties of addition. If you don't already know them, I recommend you go watch my video that I will link in the top right hand corner of the screen. But if not, we'll continue with this property, which is the commutative property of multiplication. And this property just tells us, very similar to addition, that if we have just multiplication operations in our expression, that does not matter the order in which we solve them. So let's take this example. We can speak in a general case first. If we have A times B, this is just going to be equal to B times A. So pretty simple. And we can show this like 3 times 7, and then 7 times 3. See how the orders are switched, but it doesn't matter because they're both going to be 21. And this is also true if there is more than 2 operations. So there could be, 10 multiplication problems, or for this example, there will be 3. So we'll have 2 times 3 times 4. Let's see, 2 times 3 is 6, times 4 is 24. And then we can have 3 times 4 times 2. They're the same numbers being multiplied, but now the orders are swapped. So this will be equal to 3 times 4 is 12, and then times 2 is 24. And now let's talk about the associative property. And you'll notice again, this property is almost identical to the associative property of addition. It tells us that if we are multiplying the same numbers, the grouping or the parentheses do not necessarily matter when it comes to finding the end result. So the formula we are commonly given is A times B, these are in parentheses, times C is equal to A times B times C in parentheses. And we can see this, so we can have 5 times 6 times 2, and then 5 times 6 times 2. And 5 times 6 is 30, times 2 is equal to 5 times 12. And you'll see both of these problems, the answer to both of these problems is 60. And I also want you to realize that the associative property is true for many numbers, just like the commutative property. So there can be multiple numbers, and when I say multiple, I mean almost an infinity. Well, there can be an infinite amount of numbers being multiplied to each other, and it just tells you that the grouping or parentheses can be anywhere. As long as there is only multiplication, the answer will always be the same. And the third property of multiplication is the identity property. And the identity property, well, if you think about what the identity property of addition is, it's a number plus 0 is equal to that number. So we're looking for a case where we're going to have a number multiplied to something that will give us that number. And the obvious answer here should be A, or just some number. A stands for just some number here, times 1 is equal to itself. And you can imagine here, since multiplication just means repeated addition, this is just going to be 1a, right? There's no other a's being added to each other. So we can have here 5 times 1 is equal to 5, or 20 times 1 is equal to 20, or even 1 times 1 is equal to 1. So that is the identity property of multiplication. And our next property is straightforward too. It is the zero property. And the zero property just tells us that if we multiply any number by 0, the end answer or the product is going to be 0. So we have the general case here, A times 0 is equal to 0. Is equal to 0. And this is true for any number, so we can have here 25 times 0, and this is equal to 0. And then 0 times 8 is equal to 0. You get the idea. So this just tells us, like I said, if any number is multiplied by 0, the product is going to be 0. And now let's talk about the distributive property. And the distributive property tells us that if we have some number, and I'll write the formula here, if we have some number being multiplied to, say, let me rewrite this, A times B plus C, right? So if we have a number being multiplied to parentheses, we can distribute this A or multiply this A to all of the terms here inside these parentheses. So we can rewrite this as A times B plus A times C. And we can see this here. So let's have 2 times 4 plus 3. And if we were to solve this normally, we could see here that we would do parentheses first, and this is 7, and then times 2 is 14. So we can write this as 14. But now let's try and use our distributive property here. So let's distribute this 2 to both of these numbers. So let's distribute 2 to the 4, and then let's distribute the 2 to the 3. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 times 3 here is 6. And we see we get the exact same answer. So this is 14. Now let's do this property. I know originally I said we were only going to cover 5 properties of multiplication, but I feel this one is very important as well. So this tells us if we have A and we multiply it by the reciprocal of A, or the reciprocal just meaning flipping the fractions. So if we were to write here A over 1, because this is the same thing as A, since this 1 over here just means a whole number, and we multiply it by the reciprocal, or 1 over A, or just flipping the numerator and denominator, this is going to equal 1. And you can see this makes sense because if we were to actually multiply these fractions out, we would multiply the numerators and denominators, and we would get, and I'll write this down here, we would get A over A, since A times 1 and A times 1 is A, and then anything being divided by itself is just equal to 1. So we can do this. We will have 25 over 1 times, or we don't even need to necessarily write this one. It's better that you understand that this 25 already has a 1 under it. So we will write this as 25 times 1/25. And this is 1. And you can do this with expressions as well. So we could have 5 times 2 plus 3. And then if you were to multiply that by 1 over 5 times 2 plus 3, this is 1 as well. And you could check that, but I just want you to understand this, and we are done.